Hello?
Oh, you got it. There we go. Hello? 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 We're sharing one.
Does this one work?
Hello? Oh, great. Right. We're going to talk to you about mental illness in the workplace, but rather than sort of introduce ourselves, we thought we'd show you a quick video which will explain a lot more in what we're doing, both of us. Just quickly though, I launched an exhibition about 2.5 years ago called Mad World, which is now having its second edition tomorrow. I'll come back to that in a second. And at the same time, or around the same time, Nick launched a brand, a tech solution for the sector. And this is, I suppose, a little bit about why we got involved in it and why we're tackling this particular agenda. So, Aaron, if you wouldn't mind playing that video, I'd be very grateful.
So my vision for mental health at the workplace for 2020 and beyond is the emergence of workplaces all across the UK, large and small, that are both good places to work and also generally take mental health really seriously in a positive sense.
By shifting the narrative on mental health from negative to positive, we do not only break the stigma of mental health, we create a true strategic advantage by leveraging the physical and mental energy of people.
How do we get your talent and your leadership and your graduate programs and all of the other stakeholders to really create a force of mental health within an organisation? The workplace has a really great opportunity because we're all there for so many hours a day to really do that educational piece.
We begin to see mental health as part of a much broader, holistic well-being agenda within organizations. And where organizations see mental health and therefore well-being as a strategic priority,
giving it equality really across the whole piece of physical health, mental health and financial health, and thinking about those three aspects both as individual items but also where they all come together.
Employers investing more in treatment and services. With more people coming forward and recognising they need help, I think businesses need to do much more to support people.
And we focus on three specific areas here in the UK: activity, lifestyle, and mental health. And while we may not know what the future needs of the individual are, by focusing on the person, we can always continue to adapt so that they have the right program at the time that they need it.
Let's actually start to have sensible conversations. Let's make it okay to talk about mental health. There's no reason stigma should be attached to it.
When they look after the mental health of their workforce, they are also saving money. There is a huge cost associated with what's called presenteeism, and that's people feeling like they have to show up to work even if they're struggling with their mental health.
We create an environment where we truly support our colleagues, our friends, our family and our customers through times of crisis, and also support positive mental fitness.
A workplace where mental health is not stigmatized, a world where mental health is not stigmatized. And when we're talking about mental health, we're not talking about the 1 in 4 or the 1 in 6. We're talking about the 4 in 4 and the 6 in 6. And we're thinking about mental health as something we have all of the time. All of our life we have it.
I think anything to do with this subject matter actually has to be discussed in light of the environment and the context within which we are living.
Obviously, without financial health, you can't have physical health because you can't have a safe place to live, good quality food, which has a detrimental effect on your mental health. So if you think about those three things as the pyramid of physical health, mental health and financial health, I think it brings the whole person into consideration.
Technology, our relationship with technology, the impact that it has, social media, our understanding of what's true and what's false, our understanding therefore of where we fit into things. These are all things that it's quite difficult for people to understand. So as employers, I think we've got to try and help people understand all that.
introduce development plans for their people, which is linked to their well-being. So not just a development plan about your skills and your knowledge or your behaviors, but why not have a development plan that is going to enhance the well-being, the energy, and therefore the performance of individuals in workplaces.
Proper training for particularly managers, and managers who need to be given the confidence to work out what to do with their team, make the right choices and help.
Let's not forget about our young people, our graduates. Not only are they entering the workplace and looking for employers that care about their health, they will also be our future leaders. So engaging them in this agenda is going to be so important.
Authentic leadership, we need to look at organisational issues and rather than focusing on the individual, and we need to actually get out there and talk about it and make it okay to talk about stress and mental health.
Let's go beyond mitigating psychosocial risk. Let's talk about performance and let's energize for success through health and well-being.
We're going to see a really great year of positive psychology around mental health and the narrative. I believe that we're going to be doing that from an organisation perspective, from doing that around education and self-awareness.
I think organisations are in a really great place to be leaders in this space, to start looking after the mental health of their employees in a really proactive way and becoming champions of the subject.
Progress in the last few years has been incredible, and we really are riding that wave of change. My vision for 2020 and beyond is that we're no longer talking about a vision, and we're actually living it.
Great. Sorry that was a little bit long. That's actually a sneak preview of the opening video tomorrow at Mad World. It's happening down the road at 133 Houndsditch. If any of you want to come to Mad World tomorrow, you'd be happy to come, and I'll happily share my own personal promotional code, which will give you a 50% discount on the delegate fees. But basically, we have 90 speakers, over 1,200 employers coming, and it's going to be a full event. So that's really what I do. I'm not an expert in mental health or well-being in the workplace, and I cannot advise on that. But what I do is I bring together all the people within the sector who hopefully, through their collaboration, can affect change. I'll be quiet now, because really I'm only here to introduce Dr. Nick Taylor from Unmind, who is in the space, is also a doctor, and is probably far better placed than I am to advise on what we can do. And we're going to do this in quite an informal way. I hope you don't mind. And we've been friends for a long time. He's also a founding sponsor of Mad World, and is recognised and reputed as a mental health advocate. So, Nick, first of all, can you introduce yourself and tell us all a little bit about Unmind?
Yeah, hi, my name is Nick Taylor. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Unmind. Unmind is a workplace mental health platform. So we do two things. We empower employees to proactively look after their mental health using a digital tool. But the second thing we do is we enable the organization to aggregate and anonymize all of that data to understand trends of their people. And that allows them to invest strategically in their mental health moving forwards. We work with companies ranging from John Lewis to Just Eat to William Hill, and many other well-known companies. So we're 2.5 years old. And my own background is I've spent my whole adult life working in mental health. I actually grew up with 3 sisters. My middle sister, Jessica, has Down syndrome. So I grew up watching the world treat someone differently and seeing someone see the world differently. And it instilled in me a deep fascination with what it is that makes us people. And fast forward about 20 years, I was a volunteer Samaritan, which I really enjoyed, and then a frontline support worker for the mental health charity Mind, before going back to university, because my first degree is in music and doing psychology and then clinical psychology, and then going into the NHS and leading NHS health teams. So it's been an interesting journey.
Great, okay. Actually, you look more like you're in the music business than a doctor, to be honest with you. But anyway, a couple of questions, if I may. Unmind was born around about the same time as Mad World, and probably similar to myself and my co-founder. We wanted to affect change. So I suppose my question to you is, what was the motivation for you to try and affect change in this sector?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of really brilliant things over the years of working in mental health, and have worked with some incredible clinicians. And the reality, however, is that I'm left primarily with 3 frustrations from those experiences. The first is that as a clinician, I have never met anyone at the right time in their journey towards mental ill health. I've never met any clinician who has ever met anyone at the right time in their journey towards mental ill health. And what that says is that people are waiting too long to get support when problems are occurring. And that's totally unacceptable. We wouldn't ever allow that with physical health. So why are we allowing it with mental health? So it's deeply frustrating as a clinician, because it means you know that you're getting to people too late to help them get better. The second point for the person is that they are waiting with a really unpleasant life experience when they could be getting treatment. So that doesn't work. The other frustrations are that it's 2019 and it's still too difficult for people to get access to good quality information about mental health. In today's digital world, that's a little bit bananas. And the third is that we don't focus on prevention. You know, I bet if we did like a show of hands, if you brushed your teeth this morning.
I hope so.
Okay, everyone put your hands down. Put your hand up if you didn't brush your teeth this morning. And yet I bet someone here probably didn't. But it's now so embarrassing we don't talk about it. And well done to the dentistry world, because we are brilliant at prevention in dental health. But if we were to think what is more complex, our teeth or our brain, we would definitely say our brain. So it's a bit funny that we spend all this time on prevention in our teeth, but not our minds.
Yeah, I suppose also we're taught at the age of 2 about our dental health. You know, there's even buzzers on the brushes now. I mean, just to use that analogy, that remind you have to do it for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And yet we're not talked about that for our mental health. And I suppose that brings me on to another point. Both Nick and I are big believers in that we hear all these statistics about 1 in 4 or 1 in 6. But for me, it's just absolute, to use a topical word, humbug. But it really is, because everyone has mental health, and we're all on that spectrum, and it goes from thriving to striving at different parts of life. And I really feel that is, for me, it is a guy who's been in exhibitions for over 30 years and creating brands and making them business-to-business events. I think brand mental health is getting a pretty bad rep. So what we're trying to do is actually change the imagery and the narrative around it. So when you think of physical health, and you see all these, good-looking men, women, and children, like a Nike store, you don't see obesity. When you think of dental health, going back to the same analogy, you don't see gum disease. But as soon as you say mental health, it's this picture of people with their heads in their hands, and it's just so wrong.
But also, I think one of the first things that we ever spoke about was that, and that realization that was such. Well, it's 2 things, isn't it? It's one, it's the most ridiculously silly marketing position of all time. No one would ever try and sell a pack of toothpaste with a picture of bad teeth, because no one would buy it, so you don't try and sell it. So why are we trying to get the world to engage in mental health, and we're selling black and white images of people doing this? Yeah, it's not a clever way to sell anything. But the second point is it's a massive misrepresentation of the subject, because actually it's a personal dream for me that one day one of my 3 children will come home and say, and they're 5, 2, and 1, so they're little. And by the way, my 2-year-old will brush his teeth for about 3 seconds and say, done, and then chuck the toothbrush away. So we've still got a bit of work. But I want one of them one day to come home and say, Daddy, today I learnt the most incredible thing. I've got mental health. That's where the subject naturally belongs, because it's our ability to think and be creative and problem solve and dream and feel all the emotions that we feel and build relationships. They are the best things about being alive as a human being. So how have we ended up with the subject of mental health being synonymous with kind of this? It doesn't belong there. It's the best part of being a human being, and we should celebrate our mental health. And if we position the subject in that way, then people will engage in it. It's a much more logical way to do it.
Yeah, okay, and then I suppose getting back to the business side of things, there's a lot of talk about implementing the right strategy around mental health and wellness in workplaces of all sizes. So if you were to advise, any size company, whether it be enterprise or down to, startup scale-ups, what would you suggest would be, I suppose, the first 90 days if they're starting, or if they've been doing it for some time and not, it's not working as well as it should do, and they're talking about ROI and various other bits and pieces? What do you feel, what advice would you give anyone who, that they could literally implement? We have World Mental Health Day on Thursday. What could they start doing to try and create sustainable, incremental, but systemic change at the end of the day?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. The reality is, I think every organization is different, and therefore no two mental health strategies will ever look exactly the same. So I think it is important that it's bespoke to the organization, and recognizing the uniqueness of the workforce, for example. So we work with financial institutions, and the messaging around mental health is very different to the way that, and the way you communicate with the people is different to the way that with, say, John Lewis, when they're communicating with their people who also use Unmind. You have to think very carefully about what's the message that's going to resonate with the people, and what are the communication channels that can be leveraged to message around mental health. So that's one thing. But the second thing, which slightly kind of counters that, is to recognize that everyone has mental health all of the time, and human beings are fundamentally quite similar. So actually there will be a lot of themes that will resonate across everyone, and to bring mental health to life as not just a problem set, but actually something that affects us on a daily basis. The area of mental health that we're good at talking about in society is sleep. We all talk about that quite freely. It's kind of okay to get a coffee and say, oh, I'm tired. But then the other things I think are important are senior leader buy-in. I think it's incredibly powerful to have CEOs or chair people or board level or just senior managers talk about the subject of mental health. And I don't think they need to be sharing their personal stories, though if they do, I think that can be very powerful. But I think that having them saying, hey, this is super important, and as a business, we're going to prioritize this. And then I think also making sure that there is budget available to prioritize this for the HR directors, the heads of well-being, so that they actually have the ability to invest in this. And I personally don't buy into this ROI aspect as being super important from a measurement perspective right now. Everything is measurable and should be measured, but on this particular subject, we've got a long, long way to go to get better before we need to be looking at the kind of detail around ROI. There's a lot of progress to be made. And then the final thing I would say is, amongst, there's probably other stuff, but before I stop talking, is to make sure that the well-being groups within organizations are leveraged as well, because people feel deeply passionate about this subject. It's a subject that people really care about. And therefore, there are groups of people who will have lived experience or will have supported someone with lived experience who, when they hear about an initiative in their organization about mental health, they will want to be part of it. And you can get that groundswell as well as that senior leadership engagement.
Okay, I suppose I'll leave the trickiest question till last. Given that individuals who have episodes of mental ill health, every single one of those individuals, it's far from binary. That issue is for that person at that time. And given that is the case, how easy is it for an organization to cater for every individual, for every possible case or every episode of mental ill health? Point number one. Point number two is, we talked about prevention, which for me is incredibly important. The reason I started Mad World was to get our business network into the room. So we have, I'm very pleased to say, over 600 C-suite people coming to our event tomorrow. I'm delighted about that. So the C-suite are taking it seriously. We are getting them to commit through Mad World stands, by the way, MAD stands for Make a Difference, and we're asking them to make that pledge of money over time for that sustainable systemic change. But, coming back to it, I want to move massively quickly from talking about where we are and the stigma straight onto solutions and action. And I hear a lot, it's not that easy to cater for each of those individuals. So what advice would you give organizations?
I mean, in some ways it's not that easy. In other ways, I think it is. Human beings are all the same. And the way we need to understand mental health is as a biopsychosocial model. So all of our mental health is made up of biological factors. They may be our genetics, our gender, our age, our weight, whether we have any disease, our sleep patterns. That's the biological aspect and various other things on it. And then there's the psychological aspects, which are personality type, our core beliefs. How do we interpret the world? How do we form relationships? And then there's the social aspect. What is our relationship network, both friendship, work, and family? What is our work environment? What is our home environment? What's our financial reality? And when you start thinking about all of these different determinants which will provide your individual outcome around mental health, you can think, actually, there's an awful lot of things we can be doing to support employees. Might be supporting them with their financial well-being. It might be making sure they have access to education to help them understand how to build relationships or manage conflict. But wherever you are in your life, wherever you are in your work life, home life, society, whatever it might be, there is some aspect of your environment that will be impacting your mental health, and the workplace has a huge amount of opportunity to engage in that. And then in relation to the diagnostic aspect and helping people with problems, the key thing is getting people to the right care at the right time. So to make sure that your mental health strategy covers the whole spectrum, like you said, from surviving to thriving, so that wherever you are on that spectrum, you can get the right care at the right time, which is crucially important to good health outcomes across any area. And specifically on that point, I think it's important to highlight this is not a binary subject, which I think we sometimes are moving towards by talking like proactive and reactive. The reality is, very rarely do you go to bed on Monday night with no symptoms of depression and wake up on Tuesday morning with clinical depression. It's just not how it works. You pick up symptoms over time, and at the point in which you have enough symptoms, you will be given the diagnosis. The problem with the model around today, it's still really the dominant model, is that as a society, and it's partly because of the traditional ways of delivering care, and there aren't enough of them, we wait for people to have enough symptoms to give them support. It doesn't make any sense. You want to give someone the right support as soon as one symptom occurs. So that's what organizations can be really thinking about, is across that whole spectrum. How do we make sure that we're supporting people?
Great. Well, that's it. I hope it gave you a little insight into what we both do. As I say, Mad World's on tomorrow. You're all very welcome to come. I'm going to leave you with one statistic, really, which was that we had 675 people attend Mad World last year, and we did a survey just coming into this one. We have 1,200 people coming tomorrow, and 98% of the people that attended last year said that they implemented something useful and sustainable and systemically for their companies. And I'm really hoping that 100% will be the result next year. But if you've got any questions for the expert, we'd be happy to take those. I'm going to give you this.
Oh, there's mics in the back.
I'll go behind the chair. One. So, Nick, what's the mental health toothbrush we should be using every morning?
Seeing as you asked, actually. Nick gave me one of these today, which is an Unmind toothbrush.
So, I think it's a great point. And by the way, I've never seen anyone have an under the chair mic before. That's very organized for your question. I think that there are so many things that we could use as the kind of metaphorical toothbrush, and different people will have different things that work for them. I think making time some people get a huge value in making time to practice mindfulness, for example. That's a very popular thing people engage with, which really is quite a simple idea, really. It's just staying present in the moment you're in. That's one area. I think learning, there's a huge amount from positive psychology that we can take. For example, keeping a gratitude diary, just noticing things that we appreciate. I think that's incredibly important. There's a huge value in learning and understanding what mental health is, so learning and development, because that actually helps us recognize signs and symptoms earlier, both in ourselves, but also learning how to have the conversation with others so that we can support our network and also talk to others in our network about our mental health. And I think very important is to be tracking our mental health, to be aware of what's going on, to make time to just check in with ourselves. Now, you can do that on quite a simple level. Just if you're quite a reflective person, you can think about how you are and you can track it on a scale every day. Or you can do it in a more complex way with the kind of clinical tools. At Unmind, we have a digital platform. It has a clinically validated assessment on it that people can use to assess their mental health, but it uses positive language. A lot of the traditional psychological measures will give you say a score in depression or anxiety or stress, and I think that's quite off-putting. So we created a clinical tool that gives you a score in coping, calmness, and happiness, which I think is important. Other people take huge value of exercise. Sleep is incredibly important, prioritizing sleep, and I think businesses prioritizing sleep for their employees is very important. There's huge comorbidity between sleep disorders and anxiety and depression, so making sure that we set up environments that help people to sleep. I mean, the list goes on. I think that they can have huge value, and different organizations use different language to describe those type of people, but people who are advocates for the subject of mental health or are willing to talk about mental health. I think the main thing, again, is that the language used to describe the person is appropriate to the company, but also I do think there's an important responsibility in not over expecting those people to be the solution. Often they will not be qualified people in mental health, and it's important to remember that let's say I can talk about being a clinical psychologist. The quickest you're ever going to become a clinical psychologist is 7 years full time. So it is important to recognize that whilst training people in mental health is very valuable, there are limits to what those people will be able to do from a professional perspective. But I think in principle it's a very good idea.
Yeah, I think the champions are a great idea, but the more I'm hearing stories and case studies is also that everyone should have an awareness. So, you know, the mental health first aid is very important, but everyone really should have a mental health awareness sort of training of some form. And frankly, for me, it's empathy. You know, it's nothing more than that.
Yeah, I agree with that. You hear a lot of people saying training managers or to spot signs and symptoms. I think there are two things on that. One, it's not just training managers. Everyone should be trained. And the second thing is, it's not so easy to spot signs and symptoms because human beings are very good at hiding things. The only time I think I ever can spot a sign or symptom, but given I've been studying the subject for quite a long time, is it like a drinks party and you say, I'm a clinical psychologist, and someone makes a joke saying, oh, I better hadn't talk to you. That's the biggest number one sign, I think. But beyond that, it's not so easy. But giving people the skills to have conversations is important.
Is that how we first met?
Thank you, Simon and Nick, for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
So we're just going to wait for everyone to come back into here, and then we'll get on with the next session. And then, like I said, what we're going to do is we're then going to have another refreshment break, and then we'll